Back to the Future. Could it actually happen with a real time machine?
I was devastated. I thought if I could build a time machine that I could go back and see him again and tell him what was going to happen, maybe save his life. And so that became an obsession for me.
In 1997, a self-taught electrical tinkerer named Mike Markham walked into a machine he had built inside his own garage. He stepped into the field it generated and vanished. Gone. Nobody. No goodbye. No forwarding address. His garage burned to the ground that same night. Investigators found melted copper, destroyed transformers, and a 6-foot circular burn pattern scorched into the concrete floor, but no remains. No sign of Mike anywhere. The only thing that survived the fire was a handwritten note tucked inside a metal toolbox. It read, "It's not about time, it's about how you see things." For 29 years, the internet argued over what happened to him. Time travel, government abduction, a portal to another dimension. Some people said he was dead. Others claimed he never existed at all. Then, in 2022, Mike Markham reappeared, older, exhausted, and carrying a wooden box filled with journals, diagrams, and 29 years of evidence. But what he brought back wasn't proof of time travel. It was something far, far worse. This is his story. Before we begin, make sure to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you never miss our next mystery. The Discovery. Mike Markham grew up in rural Missouri in the 1970s and 80s. No degrees, no funding, just a kid dangerously obsessed with electricity who scavenged transformers from junkyards, taught himself electronics from library books, and spent every free hour building anything that could throw a spark. And sometime in the early 1990s, that obsession led him to something he was never supposed to find. He had built a Jacob's ladder, 2 metal rods in a V-shape, high voltage, an arc of electricity climbing upward between them. Standard physics equipment. Nothing unusual. But one night, working alone in that garage, Mike positioned a cheap laser pointer to shine through the climbing arc. The hum of the transformers shifted pitch. The arc, which should have been chaotic and unstable, suddenly tightened, steadied, became something almost deliberate. And then Mike noticed something no textbook had ever described. A steel washer sitting on the workbench near the arc flickered, not moved by vibration, not knocked by airflow. It was there, and then, for a fraction of a second, it wasn't. Then it was back. He froze, tried it again. Screws, coins, small metal objects placed between the rods, and sometimes for just a heartbeat, they vanished. No sound, no movement, just a brief, impossible absence. A hole in reality where a solid object had been. And then the object was back exactly where it had been. As if nothing had happened, except the air in the garage smelled sharper. Ozone. And something else Mike couldn't name. Something that made the hair on his arm stand straight up. That was the moment Mike Markham's life split in two. Everything before and everything after. But here's the catch. He had no idea what he'd found. He just knew it was real, and he needed someone to tell him he wasn't losing his mind. In January 1995, Mike picked up the phone and called Coast to Coast AM, the legendary late-night radio show hosted by Art Bell, a man who had heard every kind of impossible claim from every kind of caller for years. Mike was nervous, stumbling over words. He told Art he'd built a device in his garage that could make objects vanish from reality for fractions of a second, and then reappear unchanged. Art leaned in. How do you know the object disappears? Could it just be an optical illusion from the arc? Mike's answer made Art go quiet. I know it disappears because I can feel it, Mike said. When the field hits right, everything in the garage feels wrong. The air feels like it's holding its breath. And I'm not the only one who notices. My dog won't come near the garage anymore. Birds won't land on the roof. Something about that field makes living things want to be somewhere else. Dead air. A real pause. Then Art said carefully, "Mike, I want you to document everything. Bring in witnesses, record video, and call me back." Now, if you're the kind of person who watches stories like this, you need to subscribe right now, because what Mike did next changed everything. And this story is nowhere close to over. Over the next year, Mike's experiments became far more dangerous. He wasn't content with making objects flicker. He wanted to understand it, master it, strengthen it, and for that, he needed much more power, far beyond what his homemade equipment could provide. During the summer of 1995, he stole 6 industrial transformers from a rural electrical substation and connected them inside his garage. When he switched the system on, it pulled so much electricity that it caused a brownout across several nearby properties. Lights flickered for nearly a quarter mile. Utility investigators followed the power surge directly to Mike's garage. He was arrested, 60 days in county jail. But here's the shocking part. Those 60 days only made him more determined. Every waking moment inside that cell was spent drawing diagrams, improving calculations, and planning an even bigger machine. He walked out more obsessed than before. By late 1995, Mike had rebuilt his system legally, buying components, adding better control mechanisms, and improving laser stabilization. When he called Art Bell again, Art noticed something right away. Mike's voice had changed, darker, quicker, almost desperate. "Objects aren't just flickering anymore, Art," Mike said. "They're disappearing for seconds, sometimes even longer. And when they return, sometimes they don't come back right." He described placing a wooden block between the electrical arcs. It disappeared. 3 full seconds of nothing. Only the hum of the transformers and the sharp crack of the arc filled the space where the solid block had been. When it returned, Mike picked it up. It was ice cold, much colder than the surrounding air, as if it had been somewhere completely different, somewhere freezing. He tested a flower next. It disappeared and came back wilted and dry, as though days had passed instead of seconds. Then Mike revealed something that made Art Bell fall completely silent. He had tested the machine with a mouse, placing it between the arcs. The mouse disappeared for 5 seconds. When it returned, it was alive, but clearly wrong. It kept spinning in circles, crashing into the walls of its cage, refusing food, refusing water. 2 days later, it died. "Mike," Art said, and you could hear something change in his voice, somewhere between fear and frustration. "You need to stop experimenting alone. Contact real scientists. Get proper oversight. This has gone far beyond what one person should be doing inside a garage." Silence filled the line. Then Mike quietly replied, "I can't stop now, Art. I'm too close." Here's the thing. He was right. He was close. But what he was close to wasn't what he believed. The final call and the disappearance. In late February 1996, Mike made his final call to Coast AM. What he shared that night stunned even Art Bell's audience, a group that believed they had already heard everything. Mike said he had expanded the field. It wasn't only affecting small objects anymore. He could step partially inside it himself. And when he did, time seemed completely different. "It's like everything slows down except you." Mike said, "You can watch things happening in slow motion. You can move between seconds. And when you step back out, you realize more time has passed than you actually felt. Like you were gone much longer than you believed." Complete silence filled the line. Then Art asked the question everyone listening was already wondering. "Mike, are you telling me you've built a time machine?" After a long pause, he answered carefully, "I don't know if it's time travel, but it's something. The field disrupts normal perception or maybe normal reality. I can't tell which, but I'm close, Art. I just need more power and a stronger stabilizer." Art tried once more to bring him back. Work with scientists, stay within the system. But by then, Mike's paranoia had fully taken hold. He believed the government was watching him. Strange cars appeared on his road. Unfamiliar people seemed to be keeping an eye on his house. Before ending the call, he made one final promise. "I'll call back in March. I'll have proof. Video, measurements, everything you've been asking for." That call never happened. March 1997. Mike disappeared without a word. His phone was disconnected. Letters were returned unopened. The farmhouse looked completely abandoned. Then one day, the garage burned to the ground. Investigators found melted copper, ruined transformers, and a 6-foot circular burn mark scorched into the concrete. Nobody, no Mike. Only a handwritten note hidden inside a metal toolbox. The case was closed. A missing person report was filed, then quietly forgotten. But online, the story exploded. By the summer of 1997, Mike Markham had become an internet legend. Time travel, government cover-ups, dimensional portals. Everyone had a theory. Nobody had any proof. Then the mystery became even stranger. In 1998, an online researcher uncovered a newspaper clipping from 1930. A man's body had washed ashore on a California beach. Male, early 30s, dressed in strangely modern clothing. Inside his pocket was a small rectangular metal device covered with buttons and unfamiliar symbols. When the old photograph was enhanced and shared online, people noticed something unsettling. It looked like the kind of gadget a 1990s inventor might have built. Had Mike somehow traveled to 1930 and died there decades before he was even born? Now pay close attention, because in September 2006, the silence finally broke. Dr. Harold Voss, a physics professor at a small university in Oregon, who also wrote a blog about fringe science, sat down at his desk on a Tuesday morning, opened his email, and felt the color leave his face. The sender's name read, Mike Markham. The message said, "I know people think I'm dead. I'm not. But I'm not exactly here either. The machine worked, just not the way I expected. I'm sending you diagrams. 3rd-generation vortex stabilization frame. Don't build it, only study it. Understand what I never could." Attached were technical diagrams far more advanced than anything Mike had ever described on the radio. Complex circuit designs, field equations, and detailed warnings about the biological effects on living tissue. Dr. Voss read the email 3 separate times. By the second reading, his hands were trembling. He tried replying, but the message bounced back. He traced the IP address to a public library in Kauai, Hawaii. Authorities investigated, but nobody remembered seeing anyone matching Mike's description. Another dead end. Another ghost hiding inside the machine. And that's when everything changed. The return. October 2022, 29 years after Mike Markham disappeared. Andrew and Melanie Carter, a young couple in their early 30s, had just bought an old farmhouse in rural Ohio. While removing insulation during an attic renovation, Melanie's hand struck something solid behind the wall. It was a heavy wooden box covered in decades of dust. Across the top, written in faded handwriting, were the words, M. Markham. Do not open until the right time. Together, they forced the box open on the attic floor. Inside were journals packed with handwritten notes, circuit diagrams, and dates stretching from 1995 to 2021. There were circuit boards, too, some burned, others perfectly preserved, sealed inside anti-static bags. At the bottom lay a Polaroid photograph showing a man standing beside a massive ring-shaped metal frame. The date stamped across it read, June 21st, 2021. On the back, written in the same handwriting, were the words, "It did work, but not the way I thought it would." But here's where things became truly unsettling. One journal contained the exact address of the farmhouse where the Carters now lived. Beside it was a note, "Magnetic field stability optimal. Safe storage location. They will find it when the time is right." How did Mike know that address? How did he know the Carters would eventually buy that exact house? And how could a box hidden years earlier contain documents dated 2021? Andrew and Melanie shared the discovery on Reddit. The post spread everywhere. Within days, people who had followed the Mike Markham mystery for decades started reaching out. Then, 3 weeks later, Andrew's phone rang. No caller ID. The voice on the other end sounded tired and worn, but anyone who had heard those old coast-to-coast recordings would have recognized it instantly. "This is Mike Markham. I heard you found my box. I'd like to explain what happened. Can I come over?" He arrived at the Carter farmhouse on a cool evening in October 2022. He was 59 years old, exactly the age he should have been if he'd aged normally since 1997. But he looked much older. His skin was weathered, his face hollow, like a man exhausted by something nobody else could understand. What Mike shared with Andrew and Melanie over the next several hours completely changed the story. According to him, he hadn't traveled through time, at least not the way everyone believed. "The machine didn't send me through time," Mike explained. "It desynchronized me from everyone else. I was still here, in the same places, during the same moments, but I was out of phase, like a radio tuned slightly off frequency. You can still hear the music, but it's faint and distorted. You were present, but never completely there." He described the night of the fire in March 1997. The third-generation machine had finally stabilized. Filled with reckless confidence, Mike stepped fully inside the field. There was no bright flash, no feeling of movement, only a quiet, unsettling sense of disconnection, as though the entire world had shifted slightly to the left, while he remained exactly where he was. When he stepped back out, everything looked completely normal, but several hours had passed. The machine had overheated and burst into flames. Mike escaped. But when he tried reaching people, something felt deeply, fundamentally wrong. Friends recognized his face but couldn't remember his name. His landlord recalled renting to someone but couldn't remember who. Phone calls led only to disconnected numbers. It was as though Mike's existence had been partially erased from other people's ability to recognize him. "I didn't disappear," Mike said. "I just became difficult to find, difficult to remember, like your brain couldn't fully hold on to the idea of me. And every time I tested the machine on myself, it only became worse. I grew a little less real to everyone around me." As the years passed, the desynchronization became even stronger. Jobs never lasted. Co-workers forgot he had ever worked there. He couldn't keep a bank account because employees couldn't remember opening one. He drifted from place to place, taking cash jobs, renting temporary rooms, living wherever nobody needed to remember him for long. Through it all, he kept researching, desperate to understand what he had actually done. What he finally discovered was more terrifying than anything he had imagined. The machine wasn't changing time. It was changing something far more fundamental: perception, memory, and the quantum probability states that decide whether a person can be seen, recognized, and remembered by other conscious minds. Every person exists because someone remembers them, Mike told the Carters. Memory shapes reality, and I damage my ability to be remembered. You can see me now. We're talking, but it's fragile, and it's getting worse. The Carters asked the obvious question. Why come back now? Mike said he was running out of time. Every exposure had made the effect stronger. He could barely remain clear in someone's mind for more than a few hours. Soon, he would become completely unforgettable, present but impossible to notice, existing only in the spaces between people's attention. He had planned this moment years earlier, hidden the box, and waited for the right people to discover it. People who would record everything before he slipped completely into unmemory. Before leaving, Mike asked the Carters for 3 simple promises. First, send the journals to a private research archive, where experts could study the work without carelessly trying to recreate it. Second, lock the attic. Some of the equipment was still magnetically active. Third, never try to contact him again. They agreed. Mike thanked them, stood up, and quietly walked out the front door. Unmemory. And this is the part that stays with you. Andrew and Melanie both described the exact same experience. The moment Mike stepped through the front door and disappeared into the night, they had to fight just to remember what he looked like. His face started fading from their minds almost instantly, like trying to hold water in their hands, his features blurring, the details slipping away. Within minutes, Melanie grabbed a notepad and hurriedly wrote down everything she could remember because it was already disappearing. The color of his jacket, gone. The shape of his hands, gone. Andrew found himself standing in the kitchen, staring at the wall, desperately trying to remember the sound of Mike's voice. He couldn't. Within an hour, they were reading their own notes as if someone else had written them. They recognized the handwriting, the paper, even the coffee stain in the corner. But the memories behind those words were fading. Not completely gone, but slowly thinning like morning fog lifting from an empty field. Within a week, they had to rely on those notes just to piece the conversation back together. The emotions, the wonder, the fear, the weight of everything Mike had shared slowly dissolved into something distant and shapeless, like waking from a dream you know mattered, but can never fully explain, no matter how hard you try. Now, years later, they say the encounter feels like something that happened to someone else, almost like a movie they vaguely remember watching late one night. They know it was real because the journals still exist. The Polaroid still exists. Their handwritten notes still exist. But the living memory of sitting across from Mike Markham, hearing his voice, looking into his face, has almost completely vanished. That is what unmemory truly looks like. Not ordinary forgetting, but something far worse. The slow, silent erasure of someone's presence from your mind, while the proof of their existence remains right in front of your eyes. If you're still watching, subscribe, because the stories on this channel don't just tell you what happened, they reveal the things that should never have been possible. The Mike Markham story leaves us with a question that has nothing to do with time machines. It's much simpler than that, and infinitely more terrifying. What happens when the one thing that makes you real to other people, their ability to notice you, remember you, and keep you alive inside their minds, suddenly breaks? Mike's answer was chilling. You don't disappear, you don't die. You simply become impossible to remember. A face nobody can fully describe. A name that slips away before it's spoken. A presence that fades the moment you leave the room. A ghost made of flesh and blood, wandering through a world that has quietly stopped noticing you exist. The Carters honored every promise. The journals were delivered. The attic was sealed. Since then, occasional unverified sightings have continued to appear. Someone matching Mike's description, asking unusual questions inside university physics departments. A man at a conference introducing himself as Mike Markham, only for nobody to remember him afterward. Reports from homeless shelters describing a man with remarkable technical knowledge who never stayed long enough for anyone to learn his name. Small traces, faint echoes, every sighting a little more uncertain than the last. Every witness slightly less convinced they had actually seen anyone at all. The fading imprint of a man slowly disappearing into unmemory. Somewhere, Mike Markham may still be out there, walking through a world that can barely notice him, still breathing, still moving, still hoping someone remembers him before the final thread breaks and he slips completely through the cracks of reality. Alive, present, and forever, irreversibly forgotten. The machine worked, just not in the way anyone expected, and the cost was a fate far worse than death. Mike Markham found a way to break reality, and in the end, reality broke him right back.